Alrighty, hello everyone. Let's make sure that we are connected. I'll jump into here really quickly. And I might have to go to my front page. Dang it! I tried to be ready. My channel. Refresh. There we go. Alrighty, so I've turned the camera the other direction around this time, and I wanted to make sure you didn't see everything backwards because some people were complaining about that. And I'd like to point out that I think it's really strange that apps like Facebook Live, probably Instagram, YouTube, that they don't automatically have the choice to flip the image when they're recording with a camera in selfie mode. It just seems like such an obvious glaring or lacking detail. I'm just amazed. So I'm hoping the sound is good. You'll have to let me know. But yeah, why would you not have these apps automatically reverse it so the shirts aren't reading backwards? Or when I held up a book last live stream, everyone said it was backwards. I'm like, I know it was backwards. I'm sorry. I was trying to see the screen, which I guess is kind of a little bit dumb since technically I can see you on this screen. So matter of fact, I might move you to that screen because it's a little more closer to the camera. Give me 1 second here to get myself a little bit better organized. Thank you for letting me know the sound is good. And I'm going to tell hello to all the people in the UK. I see Aloha, so that must be Hawaii. Switzerland, South Africa. Wow. All the faraway places are chiming in. This is awesome. So, all right, I catch you on this screen. This will be better for me. And I'll do a quick little welcome, everyone. All right, so I have things to tell you. We have not spoken in 2 weeks, and I have felt I missed you. I missed you all. But, you know, of course, I was still communicating with some of you on live stream and on social media, you know, through Instagram and my Facebook page. So something that my friends are all telling me I need to do, so I'm going to do it right now. My name is Mark Levinson. I go by MeLev. And I run a website called melevsreef.com. I sell things from there, and that is how I make a living. So if you like these streams and you want to buy something from my website, I'd appreciate it. See, that was painless. All right, so let's get the other stuff. I did a couple of really short videos about 2 weeks ago, right before I left town for my vacation for 8 days, and I made an acrylic cage. And there was a lot of reactions. There were some people that were ecstatic and said, as soon as it hits your shop, I'm buying it. There was others that swore it wouldn't work, and you know, then there was some people that actually said, hey, a guy is 3D printing something similar. Here's the link on Facebook, which was pretty cool. So I just wanted to report on the results of mine because, as I said in the initial video, it's a prototype. I just kind of said, I'm going to do this thing. So to bring you up to speed if you missed it, I used vortex pumps to create flow in the anemone cube, and the protection that I use to keep the anemones out of the pump is a sponge, or foam guard is what Ecotech calls it. And the problem is I have to take the sponge off every single day to rinse it. I mean, it's not a problem, it's just a thing I have to do. So every night when it's time to feed the tank, I turn off the vortex, but I let the return pump still run, which is kind of backwards, because usually I turn off the return pump when I feed a tank. But on that tank, I turn off the return pump, the vortex, I let the return pump that's flowing water keep the tentacles in circulation, and I drop in some food with a pipette. And while that pump is off, I remove the sponge, I rinse it, and I you know, reinstall it, and then 15 minutes later I turn the vortex back on. It's very manual intensive. And I tried to use the feed mode the other day with EcoSmart Live. EcoSmart Live uses the reef link, and you can hit feed mode and it stops the pump. But it turned off the Vectra, which is the return pump, and the vortex, and all the fish went into the anemones, and all the anemones didn't know what to do because they thought something bad is happening, like a power outage. And I dropped in the food, and no one ate it. It just kind of drizzled to the bottom because there was zero flow. So I didn't like that. I would love it if I had the ability, when I push feed mode, that I could pick which thing is off and which thing is on, and it wouldn't just kill anything that's pump-related from Ecotech. And there might be, but I'm not aware of it. You know, there's always things for me to learn. In the meantime, I'm back to my method of pushing the button off when I feed. The cage has worked out great. I joked on my Facebook page that I'm thinking about grabbing an anemone and throwing it at the cage and see what happens. And I might still do it. I've got some very small ones, about this big around. And I was thinking about, and they're on the glass where they don't belong. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll just pull that off and put it on the cage and see if there is any kind of suction that's going to pull it into the cage and closer to the pump. I really don't think there is. There's a lot of surface area on that acrylic box, and I feel like it could just crawl right over it and keep going. People were saying, well, the tentacles will get sucked in. Well, the way flow happens in a tank, you've got the vortex blowing this direction, and then you have water drawing in. And so right now, the flow pushes all the tentacles away. But if there was one on the glass nearby, could it suck in the tentacles? Potentially, yeah. It depends exactly on how the foot is positioned, how it's standing. But if you've got this box and you've got the anemone's foot here and his tentacles are pointed up, his foot is just crawling over the box and then back on the glass and going away. Should work. I don't know. Kind of tempted to try it, like I said. And there's 32 anemones in that tank. And it's not like I would sacrifice one because I can just hit stop. But I kind of want to see what it does. And I always find humor in everything. And I saw a snail standing on my cage last night. And I was like, oh, you're the thrill seeker. And he's been crawling all over that cage. Seems totally fine, but he's a snail. Anemones are a little thinner, so we'll see. I might still do it. The cage has worked out really well, and so you're probably thinking, well, why did you make this thing? The reason I chose to make this acrylic box that went over it was so I wouldn't have to use the foam sponge at all while I was away. Because I've asked my tank sitter, how often do you clean that? And he said, every couple of days. Well, as the faster it gets clogged up with detritus and leftover food and fish poop, the less flow comes out of the pump. So the sponge has to be removed every day. And I thought, I'm going to try and make his life easier. I'll make this cage for when I travel, where I can just put it around the vortex and I secure it in place with a cleaning magnet. And the rest of it is, just autopilot, and you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to turn it off. You don't have to clean it. It can just be its own thing. The interesting thing that I have seen since installing the cage are there spaghetti worms all hanging out near it. And so I could see them really well because I guess they probably were hiding within or under the foam guard, the sponge. And now that that's gone, I have all this acrylic, I can see what's happening. And I have all these spaghetti worm pictures I took and posted on my, I think Instagram? Might be there. So Instagram.com/MeLovesReef if you want to check it out. If not there, it's going to be Facebook.com/MeLovesReef. Okay, sorry, I've been ignoring all the chat. If one of you guys sees someone in here being inappropriate, which seems to happen each week, I don't know, type in all caps, hey Mark, so I can grab that with my eyeball and delete this human being. Hopefully I can, actually. I better jump into this other browser just to get access like an admin and not like a user. Hang on, just a second. How many chromas can I have for a 29-gallon cube? Are you going to put any other fish in there? I mean, I could picture 5 in there. I think it'd be really pretty. Okay, so I'm just answering questions here because I'm not in my topic yet. When it comes to a biopellet reactor, it depends on who makes the reactor. You could put them at the bottom, some tumble from the bottom up, and some, actually, I can't think of a top flow. I've seen some weird ones where the water flowed up and poured over because it was made for a nanosystem. But no, I can't think of anything else. I'm just trying to get this Creator Studio up here just a second. It's acting like there's not a stream right now. Okay, well, if somebody causes chaos, how am I going to... I don't know. I'll have to run behind the camera and hit delete because I don't see a way to get to it, which is really weird. Oh, hang on. Found it. Found it. It was a different tab. Got it. Okay, so I should be able to go in here and act like an admin. Perfect. Got it. All right. That'll work. Okay, so I told you about the cage. Sorry, I'm bumping the mic here. I feel like it's pulling on me. While I was in Arizona, I also went to visit Titan Aquatic Exhibits. And this is the place that makes huge reef tanks and fish-only systems and stuff for zoos and, I mean, I didn't ask for a list of their clients, but they have they have a Facebook page. And I've seen some of their tanks in person when I attend MACNA, because occasionally they'll do a really cool exhibit. Like they had one where the shape of it, it was a big long rectangle, but the walls were tilted like this. And the thing was only, I can't even remember exactly, but it was probably 2 feet tall, and it had this huge like tree growing out of the middle. And I think they had the typical things you'd have in a touch tank, like stingrays and stuff. I remember looking at the acrylic and not looking at the animals. And it was really a neat place to go into. And it was funny because they sand so much acrylic there, all the work they do. The floors were really, they were dusty, with the white acrylic stuff I'm familiar with. But it looked like talcum powder. And so I thought, what is this, a dance floor? Because you could scooch around really easily. And so I got to see, the stands that they construct for their tanks. I got to see some of their tanks in progress. I got to see one that was really close to done with the artificial insert that that some people want. They don't want to grow corals. They would just want something pretty to look at in their home or their place of business. So they make all this awesome stuff, and they don't sell directly to the public. You got to go through a guy. So it was really cool to hang out with the guys and see what they're doing. I've got a project I'm working on with them right now, so I wanted to see them in person, and I'll be going into that more later on. Let me answer a couple of questions. Okay, when you make RODI water, how many gallons of waste does it take to make 5 gallons of RODI? It depends on the RO system. Some RODI systems are 4-to-1 ratio, so for every 1 gallon of good, you have 4 gallons go down the drain. Some are 3-to-1, 2-to-1, even 1-to-1. It all comes down to how it's been configured, how it's set up. And when you're buying an RODI system, you may say, oh my God, that's a lot of wastewater. Well, it's really not. Like if you're going to make 10, I've done this math in the past, and I'm running off the top of my head, but let's just say you're making 10 or 15 gallons of water. The wastewater is about the equivalent of 1 bathtub. And you might say, oh my God, that's a bathtub. And I was like, yeah, well, how many times do you flush your toilet all day? How many times do you wash your hands all day? How many times do you all the other things you do with water in your life you don't think about? The laundry, the dishwasher, they're all sucking water. You go out and wash your car, you're watering your lawn. I mean, these things take water. Everything uses water. It's not a lot. It just seems like a lot when you're looking at it. But let's talk about math, okay? And I'm not discounting conservation, because we need water to live. But a lot of it gets recycled and it comes right back to us again. It's how nature works. And city water. The point is that when you hook up, if you have a water bill right now and you see that every month, you're paying $30 a month for water, and that would be really cheap. Mine's higher. You add an RODI system and you're making drinking water and water for your tank, depending on the size of your aquarium, your water bill might go up $5 a month. I mean, it's not a lot. Usually to make your own water with a 4-to-1 waste ratio, you're looking at about 3 cents a gallon for the actual consumption of water. And that's measuring the good that you collected as well as the waste went down the drain. It's about 3 cents a gallon. And if you're trying to say, well, what about the cost of the filters? What about the cost of the RODI system? Okay, do the math on that too. Factor that into your first year. I think your first year, you might be spending more like 7 cents a gallon for that till the RO system is basically equalized in payment versus going to buy water at the store. So that was a long answer to a very short question. Lynn, you asked, you said that someone gave you some live rock and it's turned green in your tank, and yet the other rock has not. That green may spread to other rocks. It's very likely. The algae phases our tanks go through, especially young tanks, it could go 3, 4, 5 different phases before it finally settles down and just looks what I call normal. And if only one rock is doing it, you have choices. Get the rock back out of your tank, wait for it to stop, and finally hope it doesn't spread to the other rocks, especially if it's not a good algae. I'll throw this at you right now. Do you have a good, healthy, hungry cleanup crew? Because if you don't, you need to beef it up right now so it can start snacking on whatever's coming out of that rock. All right, I want to get into my topic. So the topic today is redundancy. And redundancy is so important. So, feel free to chime in with your comments. This live stream will later on have the live chat included with the video because I'm doing it through my phone again. And when that happens, people will be able to read your comments as well. And then if you're watching this video later after it's been uploaded and it's just like a standard video and it's not live where I'm interacting with you, you can, of course, use the comments below to interact and say what you've done or what you wish you'd done. I'd love to hear, actually, I'd like to hear some of your horror stories. Feel free to share. I mean, we've all lived them. I've lived them. But, so let's talk about preparation. It's actually one of my talks I give when I go public speaking to different clubs across the nation. You really want to make sure that you're planning ahead when you set up a tank. And if you are just going to set up a tank and you buy the aquarium and you buy the stand and you buy a sump and you buy a return pump and you buy a skimmer and you buy, a gyre and you get some LEDs, that's pretty much it. You've spent your money. But when one of these things breaks, what do you do? Because you could say, well, it came with a warranty. Well, that's great. So you got this warranty. Let's just pretend it's the LEDs. And let's say you bought it from eBay. Okay? Some people like to save money. And you bought it from eBay, so you contact the eBay seller and say, I bought these lights from you 4 months ago and they won't turn on anymore. I need you to help me. And the eBay seller might be very happy to take care of you. Or he might be very hard to reach. Or he might be on the other side of the planet. And he says, oh yeah, I can send you another one and whatever it costs and however long it takes to get to you. And you might not get it for a week. So your tank has no light for a week because your light is out. That's why I'm talking about redundancy. You should always have an extra of stuff. I mean, I am so nuts about redundancy, and I hoard a lot of extra gear. I actually have tons of stuff I can use at any given time that I've just amassed over the years. I mean, that's how this hobby works, especially if you're upgrading. I like to save the stuff I used to have and be able to stick that on, in the back room, and then if I need it, I can hook it up, especially in a temporary situation, in an emergency situation, or just because I have to rig something. When the light is bad, you need to be able to put another light over the tank to keep the livestock healthy and happy. So you want to do that. When it comes to your pumps, especially if you're, let's say you are buying Jabo. It seems like a lot of people have really embraced buying it because it's so inexpensive and they don't want to spend the larger money like, say, for example, the Vortec pumps that I personally love and trust. So they said, oh yeah, why should I spend hundreds when I can get this for 60 bucks? I'm like, that's fine. You're getting for 60, that's a great price. Get a lot of them. Get a few in your tank and get a couple to throw in the closet. And that way, when one of those fritzes out, because they will, you can just put a new one in there. Or when one is dirty, you can take it out of the tank and stick in a bucket of vinegar and water and let it run overnight while you put a new one in the tank or a clean one in the tank. And then when this is clean, store it for later, and you can just switch them out from time to time, and your tank is always pretty. So having backups is really important. I also like to recommend when you're doing redundancy that you have the same equipment if possible. For example, let's say your return pump is a Mag 9.5. And then you say, well, I need a pump to mix my salt water in this barrel because I have a 120-gallon reef and I can't just do it with a MaxiJet. I need a decent pump. Plus, I want to use that pump to push water back into my tank so I don't have to lift buckets and pour them in. All valid concerns. Then I would say get a Mag 9.5 as well for that. And the reason being that if your return pump were to fail, you could borrow your saltwater mixing pump and keep your reef running and get another pump in the meantime because the salt water in the barrel doesn't need to have circulation that moment. Or it might even be empty. It's just a pump that waits until you need to mix salt water. So having matching pumps allows you to have matching plumbing, goes together very easily. If my return pump goes out right now, it's going to be a disaster because I'm running the Abyss pump and I don't have an extra Abyss pump. So it would require me to switch out plumbing and everything to hook up a Vectra, which is a totally different size plumbing. In the past, I ran 2 dart pumps and I had a 3rd dart pump in the back room that was ready to go. And all you had to do was just unscrew a union, switch the pumps out, hook up the union, plug it in, turn it on, back in business. But right now I'm kind of in a spot that's not really my favorite. I would really recommend that you think ahead. All right. I want to say to Chris is talking about Jabo, so and I'm just picking you out of the crowd. He says the only people that seem to have an issue with Jabo pumps are people who have spent 3 times as much for another brand and have never used one. You're right. I'm one of them. I know I know a lot of people that use them, and my friend Ryan, who has a 1,000-gallon reef, he actually did a ginormous group buy a few years ago when Jabo first hit the market, and it was insane. I mean, so many people said, "Oh, I want that pump," and I think he brought in from China in a couple of different packages something like 212 pumps. I mean, everyone jumped in because they cost nothing. I think he was getting them for like $40 a piece or something. It was insane. And so he literally bought himself like twice as many as he needed because he knew they were cheap. And he figured if they fritz out, it's way cheaper just throw another one on the tank than to replace it with something else. And I had one of the Jabos. I wanted to try one out just to see what it was like. And it electrocuted me. That's why I'm so fun. No, I was reaching the tank and it was shocking me, and it was that pump. And I'm not the only guy. Lots of people have gotten shocked by it. So I'm going to assume Jabo is maybe not UL listed. Maybe it is by now. Maybe it's gotten better, because I got it early on when they were first coming out. But I love my Vortex. I've been using them now for, since 2006, I think, 2007. Whenever they first came out, that's when I switched. And before that, I was using Tunzi pumps. And I always hated looking at the Tunzi pump in my reef. Just so you know, if you hear some weird noises in the background, my son and his wife and my grandson are arriving, and they promised not to do cartwheels and distract during the live stream. So they're coming in now. I do really like the Vortex. I mean, it's funny. I have a product review about that pump on my website, on milosreef.com, but I'm not constantly talking about it all the time. I just use them, and they're awesome. And they do variable speed. The flow is always varied. I keep extras of the inside part that sits in the tank so I can soak it in vinegar and clean it. And then when like right now, I've got a dirty one in the tank. So I will pull that off, soak it, and I'll put the clean one in the tank, and the flow just keeps going. But I really like that they're low profile and they don't take up any space in my tank. Now, I'm looking at your questions here. I mean, I think the video I shared of Dwayne's tank recently, I think he had one or two Jabos in his big, beautiful SPS reef. So, I mean, you use what you want to use. I'm just using what I use. The reason I like my Vortex is because they're plugged into a battery backup. And if the power blinks out, that pump just keeps going. And it can run for up to 24 hours long. And each battery can do 2 pumps. So I've got multiple batteries under my 2 tanks. And it keeps all the Vortex running. And it even keeps my Vectra running when the power goes out. So that was really important. That was my decision-making process. And I'm very happy with it. And I recently had a problem with Ecotech. You know what? Let me tell you some negative, because that's fair. I always talk about the good and the bad. I got 2 Vectra pumps, well, 3. Plus I sell them, okay? But I'm talking about the ones I bought for me, for my own system. I bought an M1 to put on my frag system 2.5 years ago, and plugged it in. It worked perfectly the entire time. Then I bought 2 L1s to use on my reef, one for the return pump, and then one for my manifold that would feed the anemone cube and all the reactors. And I didn't hook it up. It was one of those things where you have to change all the plumbing, and I just kept putting it off. So last August, I finally changed out one pump to the Vectra and the other pump to the Abyss. And I'd been hearing rumblings that there's a problem with the L1, but it was rumors. It wasn't like I saw definitive proof out there, so I just assumed, whatever it is, it'll be fine. And after 8 months, that L1 that I hooked up overheated and turned off. And I took it offline, I cleaned it, and I found inside of it was rust. And that surprised me, because that's not typically what would happen with anything from Ecotech. And so, I cleaned off the magnet of the impeller, got all the rust off, and I did what I could to clean the rust out of the inside of the hole. But the inside sleeve that the impeller goes into was it was kind of warped, like melted. And so I let Ecotech know on Monday when they opened up, because of course this happened on a Sunday. So I let them know on Monday there was a problem, and they said on the phone, no problem, we'll replace the pump, warranty, no worries. And I appreciated that, because technically I bought it in 2016, in December of 2016, according to the date on the box, because I save all my boxes. And the pump still had, but it only was used for 8 months. And they said, we'll send it out. So I assumed I would get it in about 4 days. In the meantime, my pump was running sorta. It was limping along. It actually overheated again, and so I turned the flow down to run it around 47% because you can actually pick what speed you want the pump to run at. And it was limping, but it was working. And I was like, okay. And then on Thursday, so from the point of failure was Sunday, I got it going again, and then it kind of messed up on Monday, but I got it limping along. Thursday, it stopped running. It was really hot, but the lights on the driver showed like it was running fine. I was like, no water's coming out. And the anemone cube's water level dropped, and it just was, the only water moving was the vortex. And I kept going to the front door checking to see if UPS had dropped off a new pump because I was thinking, it's going to be here any minute. It's going to be here any minute. I can wait. Well, after about 3 trips to the front door and about 3 hours had elapsed, I said, okay, I give up. And I opened up box number 2. That is the pump from December of 2016 that I really didn't want to open because I kind of wanted to send it back and get whatever the new version was. But they told me on my initial phone call, don't worry, if that pump ever fails, we'll take care of it. I was like, okay. So I hooked up the new pump, and everything was good. But I didn't get my replacement pump yet. I'm still waiting for that to show up. And then the following Monday, I get an email saying your pump has shipped. And I was kind of annoyed because, I told them a full 7 days prior, my pump had failed, there was a problem. And it's for livestock. It's not like, I'm asking for glass cleaner or a container of carbon. I mean, we're talking about the thing that makes the water move through the aquarium. And I was, so I was annoyed that it didn't go out sooner, but, what can you do? And then the pump showed up a few days later, and the box was half crushed. I mean, it literally was like 50% the size of what the box should have been, just a huge smash in it. And I took a picture and I sent it to Ecotech, and I was just like, FYI. I also opened up the pump itself and looked inside it because I wanted to see what was different between the original L1 and the new one. And when I took the cover off the front of the pump, the impeller was broken in half. So obviously, the way it shipped and the way it got damaged in shipping, it broke the pump. So here I am with this brand new broken pump. So I told Ecotech, the box got crushed, the pump is broken. I really feel like you could have packed it better because I ship things every day to people all over the nation, especially fragile things, and I pack stuff perfectly. I mean, I spent a lot of money on packing material because I wanted to get to you intact so I don't have to do it twice. And they apologized, and they overnighted me another pump instantly. And they, that showed up the next day. And I looked at that one, and that looked different. It had like an inside black sleeve inside the L1. So if you have an L1 that you're running right now and it doesn't have the black sleeve, you may be looking at getting one of those in your near future because that is apparently the workaround. Now, I do want to, so bottom line is Ecotech took care of everything. And that's what you would expect from a company. And my personal aggravation of having to wait so long bothered me, but because of redundancy, because of having an extra pump here, I could keep everything running. Point of this conversation, right? Now, I had another thought that I wanted to mention. Oh, the M1 pump that's been running for 2.5 years. I took it apart too. I was like, well, gee, with all these problems with the L1, what's going on with my M1 that's even older? And it was awesome. It was in perfect condition. It had a little bit of that brown slime that you have inside plumbing normally. I cleaned it all up, put it back together. That pump's been running flawlessly, like I said, for 2.5 years. So don't fear the pump. Don't fear the brand. Matter of fact, I like the brand a lot. There are going to be times where something is not going to go well, and then it comes down to customer service. And I feel like they definitely tried to make sure that they could take care of me. I don't think they treated me any differently than they treat any of you when it came to this. Because when I called and said my pump was a problem, they didn't just say, here's a new one tomorrow. They made me wait a week, and then I had the whole issue with a damaged pump, and then they had to send another one. But they definitely took care of it. And I think that's that's the good and the bad. That's telling you the whole story, so now you know. All right. Let's see. Yes, I am using the M1. It's on my frag system. So, and like I said, it's been running for, I've already said it. I don't have to repeat it. I'm just reading your questions now. Nope, that's it on the Vectras. So when it comes to your pumps that are in your tank, I would recommend that you have extras of that. If you have heaters, I recommend you have an extra heater on hand for when your heater fails. because you don't want to be left flat-footed. And let me tell you, when we're talking about redundancy, it should be common things too. Like as your test kits are getting near the bottom or they're getting close to expired because it's been a full year, you should be getting the new ones and having them ready. And when you open your test kit, so see, I transitioned right into water testing. When you open your brand new test kit, you should test the water of your tank with that kit and test with your old kit and compare those results. In theory, you should be getting the same readings on both kits, the one that's almost empty versus the brand new one. And if there's a huge difference, you're going to have to ask yourself, which kit do I believe more? Do I believe my previous one? Do I believe my new one? Do I need to get a third one to really verify or have the fish store check? I mean, these are things you have to ask yourself because you definitely want your parameters to be on track. Also, I see things where people have a disaster and their tank leaked or their tank had an issue and they had to change a lot of water and they said, I don't have any salt. I don't know how anyone can have a saltwater tank and not have salt on hand. And that's not being elitist, that's being realistic or pragmatic. Always have salt on hand because you are going to need it. Your tank relies on it. So have that. That's another thing. And it's not really redundancy, it's more like inventory. You need to have it. You should definitely have a small tank on hand for your quarantine that could be turned into a hospital tank. And you need all the gear that goes with that to keep it running. And then, of course, things to replace as that tank has needs, whether it's a hang-on-back filter, glass thermometers, all these things you want to have extras of. So if you drop it on the ground, you break it, you can reach in the drawer or the box or the bin and pull out another one and put it in there and keep going, or make a run to the store. One of the things I tend to do a lot, because I seem to lose those glass thermometers, but I like them. They're like $3 at the fish store, and I usually go up there and buy 4 or 5 at a time. And I'll throw one in my barrel that I'm measuring, if I happen to be doing that, and I'll put the other 3 or 4 somewhere and hope to find them later. But I like to have extras because accidents happen, and something smacks something and you breaks. All right. Let's see. Trying to think what else we're talking about when it comes to redundancy. This is more emergency prep, but it's part of the redundancy. Different ways of keeping the tank running when there's a power outage. You might say, well, I own a generator. Well, I had a generator once that I couldn't start in the middle of a storm. I didn't have any other choice. I thought the generator was my backup. And so I had to go up to Home Depot in the middle of the night and buy one on the spot to get the tank running. It was a huge power outage. Everyone was without power. Home Depot was without power. They were running generators to keep the store open. It was crazy. But could you have a power inverter also? Could you have battery-powered air bubblers that you can hang on the tank? These are all redundancy, extra ways of keeping life support on your tank. So keep those thoughts in mind. And what other things do I have to tell you? Keep an eye on Reef Trace, the app that came out months ago. It's out for iOS. It's out for Android. New updates are being added. I've been told something new is happening, but I don't know what it is yet. But it's coming. So, and I was told don't say anything. So I'm not saying anything specific. I'm just telling you that the app will see some updates. So if you don't have it yet, be sure to download it. It's only $3.99. And I did a little tiny video a while back showing a feature of the LFS search that now you can search for any name of a store, and you can move the marker to another part of the nation, or I guess if it's international, a different country, and see what stores are in the area you're going to travel to, and you could look up names that way, and it will search what's closest to the marker, and then as you scroll through the list, it'll go farther and farther to any name that matches the criteria of what you've typed in. Today is water testing day because it's Saturday. If you have Reef Trace, you might have saw the push notification on your screen saying make sure you post your results. You can share it to Instagram, you can share it to Facebook, you can share it with me. I love to know how you're doing with your water. I need to test my water today and see where my tank is. My tank sitter had to do some water testing while I was gone and said, hey Mark, your alkalinity is much too high, it's up to 16, so I turned off the calcium reactor. So my response in text was, are you still at my house? And of course he doesn't answer. So I call him up and he says, oh no, I left your house hours ago. So I told him, do not turn the calcium reactor back on. So let me go into that for a moment because this is an important point. When something is going wrong with your tank and someone tries to help you with it and they turn something off, it's really important, like when it's a reactor of some kind, a tube of water that's no longer moving, that they don't turn it on later, that you don't turn it on later, because the water sitting in there is going to be deprived of oxygen, deprived of flow, and it's going to become anoxic. You might even smell sulfuric odors coming from this thing. And if you were to turn it back on, you're sending all that vile stuff back into your system, and you could hurt your livestock. We don't want to hurt the livestock. So if something's turned off, your job when you get home is going to be to remove the item from the sump or from the tank, drain the water out. You might have to rinse it out and reset it and then put it back into place. But don't let the water sitting in that reactor go back into your system. And I'm just going to mention this because it's one of those things people forget about. And these videos I do always have little nuggets of truth that are going to sit in the back of your brain and come in handy later. If your power goes out to your tank and you put in something to make flow happen inside the display, that's great. But the water sitting in the sump that's stagnant overnight or 17 hours or whatever, even the water sitting in the overflow boxes, that in my tank, an overflow box holds 5 gallons of water. That's 5 gallons of toxic soup. So when the power is restored, you need to drain those overflows, throw that water away, put some more salt water in the system, and then get everything running again. Because you do not want that stuff to hit your fish, your corals. It'll kill them. So watch out for that. Updates on my own tank. Since I was out of town and I came home, I discovered that some of the rock on the far left side was just kind of like shifting and falling down, which is kind of weird. It never happens, but it did. I think my cucumbers are being exceptionally, what should we say, productive. They are really moving some sand. So I did some shifts last night and got the rocks up, and I can see corals that were hiding, which is nice because they were kind of like tilting down. I've got them back up. And the giant anemone has decided to just do more murdering in the middle of the reef. And so I reached in, and I've got all the flow off in the tank so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm trying to corral this anemone. I'm trying to pull it toward me. And it's got all its tentacles, it's trying to sting me, and it's really sticky, which is good. And I shoved it as much forward as I could. And I actually built a barrier so it can no longer go toward the back of the tank. That was always a valley between this rockwork and the shallow bommy. And I had to basically put up a wall back there. So the anemone is now facing the front and leaning against that, but it can't just keep going back because it is just murdering some of my SPS that I actually care about. And at first it was annoying, and now it's just like ridiculous. So I had to interfere with that. I spent today really cleaning the glass with my razor blade and getting all the nooks and crannies. So by tomorrow, the tank's going to be just gorgeous. And I'll take a picture because tomorrow is another anniversary of my tank. I do these monthly anniversaries, and June, July, August, September, October, November. So 7. We're at 4 years and 7 months as of tomorrow that the tank's been running. I like to keep track. I like to have a picture of the tank on the 10th of every month. So I try to clean the tank the day before so that the water's nice and clear. And that is about it for that. That was my whole list. Oh, yes. Thank you, Briar. That was the other thing I wanted to mention. So on the top of my reef, and there's a video on my YouTube channel here that's called the Reverse Check Valve Explained. I use a check valve backwards. A lot of people, they do their plumbing go up to the tank and they put a check valve in the line, and that way water goes up and there's a flapper that lifts and water shoots up to the tank and pours in the display. And then when the power goes off, the flapper comes down and stops the water from going down the drain. Well, I don't use it that way because I don't trust them. And I tell everyone, don't use a check valve that way. But that doesn't mean I'm immune to the idea of how you could use it a different way. And so I've been running my check valve on the assembly that sits on top of the tank. So you've got this big pipe going across and the water shoots in the display. And I put the check valve up there so when water is pumping up and it's trying to go out the nozzles, it also goes into the check valve and actually closes the flapper and holds it shut while the pump is running, which is 99.9% of the time. And then if the power goes out, or whenever I hit the feed button to turn off the return pump, then water tries to go down the pipe and it sucks the check valve open and sucks air in and breaks the siphon instantly. And it's a great method that has worked flawlessly since 2011. Well, I say, okay, so caveat, not exactly. Okay, for the last 6 months, it's been acting up a little tiny bit. But the rest of the time, it works great. What it's been doing is when I travel and I'm gone multiple days at a time, it doesn't seem to want to open up. versus I make it open up every single night when I feed my reef. I mean, every single night I hit the big yellow button on my reef, it stops the pump, I hear and it breaks the siphon instantly and it works perfectly. I mean, awesome. But like I was gone this time for 8 days and I came home yesterday and I hit the feed button and then I was on the phone with someone and I noticed my tank's water just got lower and lower and lower and the sump got fuller and fuller and fuller. And I was like, oh, because I traveled, you know, because I was gone so long, because that valve never got used the way I want it to be used. And my tank setter doesn't push the yellow button, obviously. So the cure is going to be to put a brand new one on there. So I went to marinedepot.com and I put one in my cart and I ordered it. Done. And I've had some people debating me on Facebook saying, that's a terrible system, you should never use a check valve. And I'm like, I'm not using the way you think I am. Like, no, I know what you're saying, but it's still a failure. You saw what happened. It did fail you. I'm like, no, it was stuck. And it's because it's 7 years old. I'm going to put a new one on there, and I'm going to be a happy camper, and I can go on an 8-day trip and come home. And honestly, all I did was take it off the system, rinse it in the sink really quick, and last night it worked perfectly again. I tried it again this morning, worked perfectly. So I mean, it was just stuck, and it might be sticking because bacteria is building up on it, or it could be that it needs silicone grease on the O-ring. That'd probably be the solution, but I'm just going to put a new one on there because I've got my money's worth out of the last one. The new valve was 23 bucks, no big deal. And my sump normally has no problem holding all the water that can drain, even if that does fail. But because I was dealing with a new ATK top-off system, my sump was fuller than it should have been, and all that water came down. And so I shared the picture on Facebook because it amused me. I was like, wow, I've never seen my sump filled to the brim before. It didn't overflow, but it was all the way up. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. I mean, that's the first time I've seen it look like that. And I've been running this exact setup since 2011. So, yeah. So that's the answer to that. That's more about that story. And if you want to try to use the reverse check valve like I do, you should. And that's why I explained it in that video, so you can check it out. The reason you cannot drill a hole in the return line under the water surface in my tank is because of the penductors. Penductors have a very small orifice and water shoots through it and it goes through this thing that kind of looks like a horn or a duckbill or whatever you want to call it. And it has slits in the side, so as the water shoots through the middle, it draws in more water. So instead of 1,000 gallons an hour coming through that tiny hole, it combines with the water around it and actually shoots 4,000 gallons an hour out of it, in theory. And when I've done this in the past where I drilled a hole to create a siphon break as a safety measure, it ended up blowing my sand everywhere. And I was shocked, and I had to build this temporary guard to prevent it from doing that, and it was really annoying. And it was ugly. It became an eyesore. So when I reset up my tank in 2013, I changed my plumbing, I did my reverse check valve, and it's worked great. So that's why I don't do the hole, because you can't with the back pressure of a penductor. Now, if I just had lock line on there, or nothing but just PVC that's pointed in, I wouldn't need that. I wouldn't need the check valve. I could drill the holes, and that'd be the end of it. All right. Okay. It's 2:47. We've been at this for about 45 minutes. I'm going to end this live stream right now because I want to spend time with family. But I'm glad that we got to get together and talk for a little bit today. There will be another live stream next week. I'm hoping to have a big announcement next week, or two. Actually, I have 2 things in the works right now. And once they're in stone, I'm going to tell you all about them. So you have that to look forward to. In the meantime, I want you to test your water. I want you to post your results, stick them on Instagram, and do hashtag post your results, hashtag water testing at Milo's Reef. Make sure your posts are public. If they're private, none of us can see it, and you're not sharing anything with anyone. So we definitely want to see what's going on. Go to Milo's Reef and buy something today so I can feed Spock tomorrow. Thanks, guys, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. All right, come over here and hit stop.